The morning sunlight filtered through my kitchen window, casting long golden shadows across the worn oak table where I sat with my coffee growing cold. The familiar aroma of French roast usually comforted me, but today something felt different. The house seemed too quiet, even for a Tuesday morning in suburban Denver. Outside, the maple tree in my front yard rustled gently in the October breeze, its amber leaves beginning their slow dance to the ground. I was reaching for my reading glasses when I noticed it. A folded piece of paper that had apparently fallen from my purse onto the hardwood floor. My heart sank as I recognized the letterhead from Patterson and Associates, the law firm that had handled my divorce 3 years ago. But this wasn't something I had requested. The return address showed it had been sent to my daughter's apartment across town. Before we dive into this unbelievable tale, please like and subscribe. I read every comment, so tell me where you're from. My name is Barbara Rogers. I'm 65 years old, and I never imagined I'd be facing something like this at my age. The letter, which must have fallen out when my daughter visited yesterday, contained details about grandparent visitation rights and legal procedures for limiting them. My hands trembled as I read phrases like concerned about unsupervised access and child welfare considerations. The signature at the bottom made my stomach drop. It was from my own daughter, Jessica Martinez, working with her father to build a case against me. Jessica had always been my problem person, even as a child. Now 38 and recently divorced herself, she'd become increasingly controlling about when I could see my 7-year-old grandson, Tommy. I'd attributed her behavior to stress from her own custody battles, never imagining she was systematically planning to cut me out of Tommy's life entirely. The sound of footsteps on my front porch interrupted my racing thoughts. Through the lace curtains, I could see my older son, Michael Rogers, approaching the door, his familiar navy work jacket and graying temples visible in the morning light. At 42, Michael had always been my steady rock, the one family member I could count on completely. He worked as a contractor and often stopped by before his job sites to check on me. "Mom, you look like you've seen a ghost," Michael said as he entered through the front door, the cool autumn air following him inside. The scent of sawdust and coffee clung to his clothes, and his work boots clicked against the hardwood floor as he approached the kitchen. "What's wrong?" I handed him the letter without saying a word, watching his expression change from casual concern to complete shock as he read. The kitchen fell silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of neighbors starting their morning routines. Michael's jaw tightened as he reached the end of the document. "This can't be right," he said, his voice carrying the same protective tone I remembered from when he was a teenager defending his siblings. "Jessica wouldn't do this behind your back. There has to be some explanation." But even as he spoke, I could see the doubt creeping into his dark eyes. We both knew Jessica's pattern of behavior had become increasingly erratic since her divorce. The supervised visits, the sudden cancellations, the way she'd hover anxiously whenever I interacted with Tommy during family gatherings. I needed advice from someone outside the family, someone with a clear perspective. My neighbor Dorothy Chen had been my closest friend for over 15 years, ever since she'd moved into the blue colonial house next door. A retired social worker with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, Dorothy had helped me navigate countless family crises with her calm wisdom and practical experience. "I'm going to call Dorothy," I told Michael, reaching for my phone with shaking hands. "She needs to know about this." 20 minutes later, Dorothy sat at my kitchen table, her usual cup of chamomile tea steaming beside the damning letter. She'd arrived wearing her gardening clothes, dirt-stained jeans and a faded green sweater, having dropped everything in her flower beds when she heard the urgency in my voice. Her weathered hands moved slowly as she read each page, her expression growing more serious with every paragraph. "Barbara, This is more detailed than a casual inquiry, Dorothy said finally, her professional training evident in how carefully she chose her words. These questions about your health, your living situation, your financial stability, they've been gathering information for weeks, maybe months. The afternoon light had shifted, and the kitchen now felt smaller, more confined. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking in the distance and the low rumble of traffic from the main street 2 blocks away. Everything seemed normal outside, but inside this room, my world was crumbling. "What I don't understand," Michael said, running his hands through his hair in frustration, "is why she'd work with Dad on this. They barely spoke during the divorce proceedings. She was furious with him for walking out on the family." Dorothy nodded thoughtfully, her social worker instincts clearly engaged. Sometimes people form unlikely alliances when they share a common goal. If Jessica genuinely believes she's protecting Tommy, she might justify working with anyone who can help her achieve that. As the three of us sat around my kitchen table, surrounded by the familiar comfort of my home, the collection of ceramic roosters on the windowsill, the family photos covering the refrigerator, the hand-knitted Afghans draped over the nearby chairs, I realized how much I had to lose. This wasn't just about legal rights or scheduled visits. This was about my relationship with my grandson, the little boy who called me Grandma Barbie and ran to me with scraped knees and exciting stories about school. I stood up slowly, my knees creaking slightly as I moved to the window overlooking my backyard. The swing set I'd installed last spring for Tommy's visits sat empty, its bright red seats swaying gently in the breeze. The sandbox beside it was covered with a blue tarp, waiting for warmer weather and little hands eager to build castles. "I need to know exactly what Jessica has been telling them," I said, turning back to face Michael and Dorothy. "There has to be specific incidents or concerns they're using to build this case." Dorothy's expression grew even more serious as she reached the final page of the legal documents. "Barbara, there's something else here. They've scheduled a meeting for tomorrow afternoon to discuss filing a formal petition with the court." The words hit me like a physical blow. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to figure out what had gone so wrong between Jessica and me, and what I could possibly do to fix it. And that's when the pattern snapped into place. Michael leaned forward, his face pale. "Tomorrow? They're moving that fast?" "We need to understand what specific incidents they're citing," Dorothy said, her voice taking on a more professional tone. "Barbara, think back over the past few months. Any accidents when Tommy was here? Any disagreements with Jessica about his care?" I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to push through the fog of shock. There was that day in October when Tommy scraped his knee on the driveway. But kids get hurt playing. That's normal. Jessica seemed fine about it when she picked him up. "What about his bedtime routine?" Dorothy asked. "Or meals? Sometimes grandparents and parents have different approaches." A memory surfaced, sharp and uncomfortable. "Last month, Jessica got upset because I let Tommy have ice cream before dinner. She said I was undermining her authority and that Tommy expected treats at home because Grandma always gave them to him." I sank back into my chair. But he'd been so excited to show me his report card. It seemed like such a small celebration. Michael shook his head in disbelief. "She's building a case out of normal grandparent stuff. This is insane." But Dorothy's expression remained troubled. "There has to be more, Barbara, more." Courts don't typically restrict grandparent rights unless there are serious safety concerns or evidence of harm to the child's well-being. The kitchen fell silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock above the stove. I watched the second hand make its relentless circle, marking time that seemed to be running out for me and Tommy. "Wait," I said slowly, a cold realization creeping over me. Dorothy, you said they've been gathering information for weeks, maybe months. What if this isn't just about ice cream and scraped knees? Dorothy nodded grimly. What else, Barbara? Think. I stood up again, pacing to the sink where dirty breakfast dishes still sat from this morning. This morning, when my biggest worry was whether to plant tulips or daffodils in the front garden this spring. There was Thanksgiving, I said quietly. Michael straightened in his chair. What happened at Thanksgiving? The memory felt like swallowing glass. Jessica brought Tommy over for our usual Thursday afternoon visit, but when she came to pick him up, she found me in the bathroom. I'd gotten dizzy and needed to sit down for a minute. Dorothy's voice was gentle but probing. How long were you in there? Where was Tommy? He was watching cartoons in the living room. I couldn't have been gone more than 5 minutes. But when I came out, Jessica was there, and Tommy was crying because he'd spilled his juice on the carpet. I turned to face them, seeing the concern in their eyes. She asked if I was sick, if this happened often. I told her it was just a dizzy spell, that I'd skipped lunch and my blood sugar was probably low. But she didn't believe you, Michael said, understanding dawning in his voice. She started asking all these questions about my health, whether I was taking medication, whether I'd seen a doctor recently. At the time, I thought she was just worried about me. I laughed bitterly. I was actually touched by her concern. Dorothy was making notes on the back of one of the legal papers. That explains the health questions. What else? The floodgates had opened now, and memories I'd dismissed as minor irritations suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. 2 weeks later, she showed up early for pickup. She has a key, so she just walked in. I was taking a nap on the couch, and Tommy was playing quietly with his blocks on the floor next to me. There's nothing wrong with that, Michael said defensively. But Jessica saw it differently. She woke me up asking why Tommy wasn't supervised, why I was sleeping during his visit. She said what if he'd gotten into something dangerous while I was unconscious. I rubbed my eyes, feeling suddenly exhausted. I tried to explain that I wasn't unconscious, just resting, and that Tommy is a good boy who knows the house rules. But she just kept pushing. Dorothy looked up from her notes. The pattern is becoming clearer. Jessica seems to believe you're either too old or too unwell to properly supervise Tommy. That's ridiculous, Michael said, his voice rising with indignation. Mom, you're 68, not 98, and you're in better shape than half the people in my neighborhood. But I was remembering more now, small moments that had seemed like normal family interactions, but now felt like interrogations. Last week, when she came to get Tommy, she commented on the fact that I hadn't taken him to the park. It was 30 degrees outside and windy, so we'd stayed in and made cookies instead. But she made this comment about Tommy needing fresh air and exercise. You made cookies together? Dorothy said firmly. That's quality time with his grandmother, not neglect. But she also noticed that I'd forgotten to give him his afternoon snack at the usual time. We were having so much fun with the baking that it slipped my mind. Tommy didn't even mention being hungry. I sank back down at the table, feeling the weight of all these small failures accumulating. She said something about maintaining consistent schedules being important for children his age. Michael reached across and squeezed my hand. Mom, every single thing you're describing sounds like normal life with a 6-year-old. Jessica is being unreasonable. But Dorothy was studying the legal papers again, her expression growing more concerned. Barbara, according to this, Jessica has documented 12 separate incidents over the past 3 months where she felt Tommy's safety or well-being was compromised during your visits. 12? The number hit me like a slap. I can only think of maybe 4 or 5 things that could possibly be construed as problems. Then there are things you might not even realize were being evaluated, Dorothy said quietly. Phone calls where Tommy mentioned something innocent that Jessica interpreted as concerning. Questions she asked him about his visits that led to answers she found troubling. The thought of Jessica questioning Tommy about our time together, turning our precious afternoons into evidence against me, made my stomach churn. She's been using my own grandson to build a case against me. Michael's chair scraped against the floor as he pushed back from the table. I can't believe Jessica would do this. I mean, I know she's always been controlling, but this is a whole new level. People do extreme things when they believe they're protecting their children, Dorothy said. The question now is what we can do before tomorrow's meeting. But as I sat there, surrounded by the evidence of my alleged failures as a grandmother, I realized the most painful truth of all. Jessica genuinely believed I was a danger to Tommy. This wasn't about spite or control. She truly thought she was protecting her son from me. And that realization led me to the decision that would change everything. Block 3. I need to call Jessica, I said suddenly, standing up from the table. I need to talk to her before tomorrow's meeting. Dorothy looked up sharply from the papers. Barbara, I'm not sure that's wise. Anything you say could potentially be used against you. But she's my daughter, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Before she was Tommy's mother, before all of this legal mess, she was my little girl. Maybe if I can just talk to her, mother to mother, we can work this out. Michael shook his head. Mom, Jessica isn't exactly in a reasonable frame of mind right now. You saw how she was at Tommy's birthday party last month? She barely spoke to you. I remembered that day painfully well. Jessica had been polite but distant, watching my every interaction with Tommy like a hawk. When I'd helped him blow out his candles, she'd quickly stepped in to cut the cake herself. When I'd offered to help clean up, she'd insisted everything was under control. That's exactly why I need to try, I said, reaching for my phone. I can't let this go to some formal mediation without at least attempting to bridge this gap myself. Dorothy stood up and gently placed her hand on my arm. If you're determined to do this, at least think about what you want to say first. Don't call while you're emotional. I am emotional, I said, setting the phone back down. I'm heartbroken. My daughter thinks I'm a threat to my grandson. How am I supposed to not be emotional about that? Michael moved to stand beside me. What are you hoping to accomplish with this call, Mom? What's the best-case scenario? I thought about it for a moment, trying to organize my swirling thoughts. I want to understand her perspective. Really understand it, not just hear it secondhand through legal documents. And I want her to understand mine. And if she won't listen? Dorothy asked gently. If she just gets defensive or angry? Then at least I'll know I tried everything before tomorrow. I picked up my phone again, my hands trembling slightly as I scrolled to Jessica's number. I can't live with myself if I don't at least attempt to reach her. The phone rang 3 times before Jessica answered. Mom? Her voice was cautious, surprised. Hi, sweetheart. I was hoping we could talk. There was a long pause. About tomorrow's meeting? Mom, I really think we should handle this through the proper channels now. Jessica, please, just give me 5 minutes. I'm not calling to argue or to try to talk you out of anything. I just want to understand. Another pause, then a sigh. Understand what? I took a deep breath, aware that Michael and Dorothy were watching me intently. I want to understand how we got here. How I went from being Tommy's grandmother, who he was excited to visit, to someone you think might hurt him. Mom, this isn't about hurting him. It's about consistency and structure. Tommy needs routine, and he needs to know that the adults in his life are reliable. Can you give me a specific example? Something concrete that I did wrong? Jessica's voice grew tighter. Last month when you picked him up from school, you were 20 minutes late. Tommy was the last child there, and he was upset. I closed my eyes, remembering that day. I got caught in traffic from that accident on Highway 9. I called the school to let them know I was running late. But Tommy didn't know that. All he knew was that everyone else's parents had come and gone, and he was sitting there wondering where you were. You're right, I said quietly. That must have been scary for him. I should have thought about how it would feel from his perspective. The admission seemed to catch Jessica off guard. Oh, well, yes. It was just one of many things. What else? Help me understand. The park situation Dorothy mentioned earlier. You kept Tommy inside all day when he'd been looking forward to going to the playground all week. It was 30 degrees and windy, I said. I was worried he'd get cold. Mom, kids play outside in 30-degree weather all the time. Tommy has a coat. He needs physical activity, not to be cooped up inside all day. I felt Michael squeeze my shoulder supportively. You're right about that too. I was probably being overly cautious. And then there was the incident with his medication, Jessica continued, her voice gaining momentum. You forgot to give him his allergy medicine before letting him play with the neighbor's cat. My heart sank. I had forgotten about Tommy's mild cat allergy, and he'd spent the rest of the evening with watery eyes and sniffles. Jessica, I feel terrible about that. It completely slipped my mind. These aren't just isolated mistakes, Mom. They're part of a pattern. Tommy comes home from your visits tired, off his schedule, sometimes upset about something that happened. What kinds of things upset him? Jessica hesitated. Well, he mentioned that you cried during one of his visits. That scared him. I remembered that day. I'd been watching an old movie while Tommy played with his toys, and I'd gotten emotional during a particularly touching scene. Tommy had noticed and asked why I was sad. I'd explained that sometimes grown-ups cry during movies, and he'd seemed to understand. I wasn't crying about anything serious, I explained. It was just a movie. I explained that to Tommy. But he worried about it for days afterward. He kept asking me if Grandma was okay, if she was sad about something he did. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I'd had no idea that my moment of emotional vulnerability had affected Tommy so deeply. Dorothy was making gentle gestures, encouraging me to stay calm and keep listening. Jessica, I had no idea he was worried about that. Why didn't you tell me? Because every time I try to bring up concerns, you get defensive, like you're doing now. I'm not getting defensive. I'm trying to understand so I can do better. Mom, that's exactly what I mean. You're arguing with me about whether you're being defensive instead of just listening. I stopped, realizing she was right. I was doing exactly what she said. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Please, keep telling me what's been concerning you. This seemed to surprise Jessica again. I'm not trying to attack you, Mom. I love you. But Tommy is my responsibility, and I need to know that when he's in your care, his needs are being met consistently. Of course you do. You're his mother. That's your job. Sometimes I feel like you think I'm being too strict or too controlling. Like when I ask about what he ate or what time he went to bed, you act like I'm micromanaging. I thought about this. I suppose I do sometimes feel like you don't trust my judgment, like you think I don't know how to take care of a child. It's not that I don't trust you, Mom. It's that Tommy thrives on routine, and when that gets disrupted, it affects his behavior for days. Can you help me understand what routines are most important to him? What I should be paying closest attention to? For the first time in the conversation, Jessica's voice softened slightly. Really? You want me to explain his schedule? Yes. I want to do better, Jessica. I want Tommy to feel safe and secure when he's with me. Michael gave me an encouraging nod from across the room. Well, his afternoon snack is usually around 3 o'clock, and it's important that it's something with protein, not just crackers or cookies. He gets cranky if his blood sugar drops. Okay, protein snack at 3. What else? He needs at least an hour of physical activity every day, even if it's just dancing to music inside when the weather's bad. And his medication needs to be given at 6 p.m. if he's going to be around any pets or if the pollen count is high. I was mentally taking notes. What about bedtime routine? Stories are really important to him. He likes to pick out 3 books, and he likes the reader to do different voices for the characters. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. He always brings me the same 3 books when he stays over. I never realized it was such an important routine for him. Those are his security books. He's had them memorized since he was 4, but they comfort him. We talked for another 10 minutes, with Jessica explaining Tommy's needs and preferences in detail. Some of it I knew, but much of it was new information that helped me understand my grandson better. Jessica, I said finally, I appreciate you taking the time to explain all this, but I have to ask, do you really think we need lawyers and formal mediation to work this out? Can't we try to handle this between us? The line went quiet for a long moment. Mom, I want to trust that you'll make these changes, but we've had versions of this conversation before. When? After the medication incident, I tried to talk to you about being more careful with his allergies, and you said you understood. But then a month later, you gave him strawberry yogurt even though you know strawberries make him break out. I winced. She was right about that too. I think having some formal structure might actually help both of us, Jessica continued. Clear guidelines that we both agree to follow. And if I don't agree to the restrictions you're proposing? Mom, I'm hoping we won't get to that point. I'm hoping tomorrow we can work out something that feels fair to everyone. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, processing everything Jessica had told me. How did it go? Dorothy asked gently. Better than I expected, I said slowly. And worse than I hoped. Michael sat back down beside me. What do you mean? She's not doing this to punish me. She's genuinely worried about Tommy's well-being, and honestly, some of her concerns are valid. That's good, right? Dorothy said. If you can both acknowledge the legitimate issues, maybe you can work together to solve them. But she also made it clear that she doesn't think I can change without external oversight. I looked at the legal papers still spread across the table. She wants formal documentation of my visitation conditions because she doesn't trust me to follow through on my promises to do better. Can you blame her? Michael asked quietly. Based on what she just told you about previous conversations you've had? I shook my head. No, I really can't. I've been so focused on feeling attacked that I haven't been taking her concerns seriously enough. Dorothy gathered up the papers. So, what do you want to do tomorrow? How do you want to approach the mediation? I thought about everything Jessica and I had discussed. About Tommy's needs, about my failures, about the trust that had been eroded between us. I want to propose something that I think might surprise everyone, I said. Including Jessica. What's that? Michael asked. But before I could answer, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Jessica calling back. It was Tommy himself. I stared at my phone, seeing Tommy's name on the caller ID. My heart jumped. He almost never called me directly. Usually all communication went through Jessica. "It's Tommy," I said to Michael and Dorothy, my voice barely above a whisper. "Answer it," Dorothy urged gently. I swiped to accept the call. "Hi, sweetheart." "Grandma?" Tommy's voice was small and uncertain. "Mom's in the shower and I used her phone. I hope that's okay." "Of course it's okay, honey. I'm always happy to hear from you." I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside I was churning. Why was he calling? Had he overheard Jessica and me talking earlier? "I heard Mom on the phone with you," he said, confirming my fear. "She sounded upset after." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. This little boy shouldn't have to worry about adult problems. Shouldn't have to comfort his mother after difficult conversations about his own safety. "Your mom and I were just working through some grown-up stuff, Tommy. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it because I got sick at your house?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked at Michael and Dorothy, both watching me with concerned expressions. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his grandmother has been careless with his health without making him feel responsible for the family conflict? "Tommy, you getting sick was not your fault, okay? Not even a little bit. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and I made a mistake by not being careful enough about your medicine." "But you always take good care of me," he said, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. "You make me pancakes, and we watch movies, and you help me build Legos." My throat tightened. He was trying to make me feel better, this sweet child who shouldn't have to manage adult emotions. "I do love spending time with you, sweetheart. More than anything, and I want to keep doing all those things with you. That's why your mom and I are talking about how to make sure you stay healthy and safe when you're with me. Are you not going to be my grandma anymore?" The fear in his voice broke something inside me. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. Michael moved closer, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Oh, Tommy, honey, I will always be your grandma. Always. No matter what happens, no matter what changes, I will always love you, and I will always be your grandma. Promise?" "I promise, with my whole heart." I heard voices in the background, Jessica's voice calling for Tommy. "Mom's done with her shower," he whispered. I should give her phone back. "Okay, sweetheart. Thank you for calling me. It means so much to hear your voice." "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, Tommy. So very much." The line went dead, and I sat there holding the phone, tears streaming down my face. "Oh, honey," Dorothy said, moving to sit on my other side. "He was afraid I wouldn't be his grandma anymore," I said, my voice breaking. "He thinks this is somehow his fault." Michael squeezed my shoulder. "Kids always think adult problems are their fault somehow. It's how their minds work." "But he shouldn't have to think about any of this," I said. "He should just be able to be a kid, to trust that the adults in his life will keep him safe and handle their own problems." Dorothy handed me a tissue. "And now you can be that adult for him." I wiped my eyes, thinking about Tommy's scared little voice, about Jessica's exhausted tone during our conversation, about the medication errors and forgotten allergies that had led us to this point. "I've been so focused on defending myself," I said slowly, "on proving that I'm not the terrible grandmother Jessica thinks I am. But listening to Tommy just now, hearing how confused and scared he is, I realize that's not what matters." "What matters?" Michael asked. "What matters is that he feels safe and loved. What matters is that Jessica doesn't have to worry every time she drops him off with me. What matters is rebuilding the trust I've damaged through my carelessness. I looked at the legal papers Dorothy had stacked on the coffee table, thinking about tomorrow's mediation, about the formal structure Jessica wanted to put in place. You said you wanted to propose something that would surprise everyone? Dorothy reminded me. What were you thinking? Before I could answer, we heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I could see Jessica's car in my driveway. She was here. Now. Tonight. And she looked upset. I stood up quickly, my heart racing as I watched Jessica walk toward my front door. The porch light illuminated her face, and even from this distance, I could see she'd been crying. She looks terrible, Dorothy said softly, moving to stand beside me at the window. Michael gathered up the legal papers from the coffee table without being asked, tucking them into Dorothy's briefcase. Should we go? No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Stay, please. I think it's time we all talked honestly about what's been happening. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by Jessica's voice. Mom, I saw the lights on. Can we talk? I opened the door to find my daughter looking more vulnerable than I'd seen her since she was Tommy's age. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore an old sweatshirt I recognized from her college days, and her eyes were red from crying. Jessica, honey, come in. Dorothy and Michael are here. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. I'm sorry for just showing up like this. I dropped Tommy off at David's for the night, and I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation earlier. Tommy called me, I said gently. About an hour ago. Jessica's face crumpled. He what? How did he? Oh God, he used my phone while I was in the shower, didn't he? I wondered why it wasn't where I left it. He was scared, sweetheart. He thought he might not be my grandson anymore. That's exactly what I was afraid of, Jessica said, her voice breaking. I've been driving around for the past hour, trying to figure out how to fix this mess I've created, how to protect him without destroying his relationship with you. Dorothy cleared her throat softly. Jessica, would you like to sit down? I think your mother has some things she'd like to say. Jessica looked between us uncertainly, then nodded and took a seat on the couch. I sat across from her, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. First, I want to apologize, I began. Not just for the medication mix-up or forgetting about Tommy's food allergies, but for dismissing your concerns when you tried to talk to me about them. You weren't being controlling or overprotective. You were being a good mother. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I never wanted to hurt you. But when you gave him David's allergy medication, and then last week when you couldn't remember if you'd given him his inhaler or not, I got scared. Really scared. I understand that now, I said. And I understand why you felt like you had to take legal steps to protect him. But Jessica, going behind my back, meeting with David to plan how to limit my time with Tommy, that hurt more than I can express. My daughter looked down at her hands. I know, I handled it all wrong. I was just so worried, and when David suggested the supervised visitation structure, it seemed like a solution that would keep Tommy safe while still letting you see him. Supervised visitation, Michael said quietly. Jessica, you do realize how that sounds, don't you? Like your mother is dangerous. She's not dangerous, Jessica said quickly. She's just getting older and maybe a little forgetful. And I thought if we had some structure in place, structure that treats me like I'm incompetent, I said. Jessica, I'm 68 years old, not 98. Yes, I made some mistakes, serious ones, but that doesn't mean I've lost the ability to care for my grandson safely. Dorothy leaned forward slightly. Jessica, can you help us understand what you and David discussed? What kind of limitations were you planning to request? Jessica shifted uncomfortably. We weren't trying to cut Mom out completely. We thought maybe visits could be limited to a few hours at a time, with someone else present, at least until... Until what? I asked. Until we could be sure Tommy would be safe. The words hung in the air between us. I felt the familiar surge of defensive anger, but this time I took a deep breath and really listened to what my daughter was saying underneath her words. You don't trust me anymore, I said softly. Jessica started to protest, then stopped. I want to trust you, Mom. But trust isn't just about love. It's about feeling confident that the person you're trusting won't put your child at risk, even accidentally. And I've put Tommy at risk. Twice. Yes. The simple honesty of her answer hit harder than any accusation could have. Michael reached over and squeezed my hand supportively. So, where does that leave us? I asked. Because, Jessica, I love that little boy more than life itself, and I can't bear the thought of him growing up thinking his grandmother is someone to be managed and monitored. I don't want that either, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face now. I want him to have the same kind of relationship with you that I had with Grandma Rose. But Mom, I also can't go through another night like the one after the allergy incident, wondering if my son is going to end up in the emergency room because of a preventable mistake. Dorothy pulled a tissue from her purse and handed it to Jessica. What if there was a way to rebuild that trust gradually? Something that acknowledged the seriousness of what happened, but also recognized that relationships and safety can coexist? What do you mean? Jessica asked. Before Dorothy could answer, I held up my hand. Actually, I think I know what she means, and I have an idea. Something I want to propose tomorrow at mediation that might surprise everyone. Jessica looked at me warily. What kind of idea? The kind that puts Tommy's well-being first, acknowledges my mistakes, and gives us a path forward that doesn't involve treating me like a stranger in my grandson's life. Just then, my phone rang. We all froze as I looked at the caller ID. It was David, and given the expression that just crossed Jessica's face, she had no idea why her ex-husband would be calling me at 9:30 at night. I stared at the phone, David's name glowing on the screen. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too quiet except for the persistent ringing. Are you going to answer it? Michael asked gently. Jessica looked genuinely confused. I don't understand. Why would he be calling you? We finished talking hours ago. The phone continued to ring. I realized this moment mattered more than just whatever David wanted to say. How I handled this call, right here in front of Jessica, could either rebuild a bridge or burn it down completely. I'm going to answer, I said, looking directly at my daughter. And I'm putting it on speaker. No more secrets, no more going behind anyone's back. Jessica's eyes widened slightly as I swiped to accept the call. David, you're on speaker with Jessica, Michael, and Dorothy. What's going on? There was a pause, then David's familiar voice filled the space between us. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. I was calling because I've been thinking about our conversation earlier, and I realized I owe you an apology. Jessica leaned forward, clearly not expecting this turn. What kind of apology? I asked carefully. The kind where I admit that going behind your back was wrong, regardless of our concerns about Tommy's safety. Jessica and I should have talked to you directly first, given you a chance to address our worries before jumping straight to legal action. I watched Jessica's face as her father continued. She looked torn between surprise and something that might have been relief. I appreciate that, David. But I understand why you both felt you couldn't come to me directly. My track record lately hasn't exactly inspired confidence. That's just it, though, David said. I've been thinking about the bigger picture. You made 2 serious mistakes, yes. But you've also been Tommy's grandmother for 3 years. You've given him baths, put him to bed, taught him to ride his tricycle. You've never been careless with his safety before these incidents. Jessica was staring at the phone now, as if seeing her father in a completely new light. So, what are you saying? I asked. I'm saying maybe we were so focused on preventing future problems that we forgot to consider what we'd be taking away from Tommy if we severely limited his time with you. He talks about Grandma constantly. He asks when he can come to your house, when you're going to read him stories again. I felt my throat tighten. Jessica reached across the table and touched my arm, the first genuinely affectionate gesture she'd made toward me in weeks. David? Jessica's voice was soft, uncertain. Are you saying you don't want to go through with the petition tomorrow? Another pause. I'm saying I think we should hear what your mother has to propose first. She mentioned having an idea. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, knowing that what I said next could change everything. What I'm proposing is that I take a certified course in child safety and emergency response. That I voluntarily agree to supervised visits for the first month while I complete the training. Not because a court ordered it, but because I want to prove to all of us that I can be the grandmother Tommy deserves. Michael smiled at me encouragingly. Dorothy nodded approvingly. But here's the part that might surprise you, I continued. I want Jessica to be the supervisor for those visits. Not some court-appointed stranger, not David, but my daughter. Because the trust that needs rebuilding isn't just about my competence with Tommy. It's about the relationship between Jessica and me. Jessica's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked different. Less like grief and more like hope. You'd really be willing to do that? She asked. Have me watching over your shoulder, second-guessing your decisions? If that's what it takes to get us back to a place where you don't feel like you need to watch over my shoulder anymore, then yes, absolutely. David's voice came through the phone again. What about after the month of supervised visits? Then we evaluate together, all of us. If Jessica feels confident in my safety awareness, we gradually return to normal visits. If she still has concerns, we extend the supervision and figure out what else needs to change. Dorothy leaned forward. It's essentially what I was going to suggest in mediation, but you're proposing it voluntarily. That changes the entire dynamic from adversarial to collaborative. Jessica was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, she looked up at me. You'd really put yourself through all that? The classes? The supervision? Having to prove yourself? Jessica, honey, I've already lost too much time with Tommy because of my mistakes. If proving myself gets me back to being his grandmother instead of a liability, then it's not a sacrifice. It's an investment in our family. I need to think about this, Jessica said quietly. Of course you do, I replied. But whatever you decide, I want you to know that I heard what you said tonight. About trust being about confidence, not just love. You were right, and I'm ready to do the work to earn that confidence back. David's voice interrupted the moment. There's one more thing. Margaret, Jessica doesn't know this yet, but I've been having second thoughts about the custody arrangement too. Jessica's head snapped up. What do you mean? But before David could answer, the coffee shop lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness just as he began to speak again. The emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, casting eerie shadows across the coffee shop's walls. The soft hum of the espresso machine died away, leaving us in an otherworldly quiet broken only by the muffled sounds of traffic outside and David's voice still coming through Jessica's phone. "Sorry, the power just went out here," I said toward the phone, my voice sounding strange in the dimmed space. "You were saying something about having second thoughts?" Dorothy pulled out her phone's flashlight, creating a small circle of normal light around our table. The barista behind the counter was doing the same, and I could hear her muttering about the circuit breaker. "Yeah," David's voice continued, tinny but clear through the speaker. "Jessica, I need to tell you something. When I first suggested going for custody modification, I was angry. Really angry at your mom for what happened at the park." Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her chair, the leather creaking in the unusual quiet. "Dad, what are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that anger isn't a good foundation for major decisions about Tommy's life. And after talking to my attorney about what a custody fight would actually involve, the depositions and testimony, and dragging Tommy through evaluations, I started wondering if we were solving the right problem." The emergency lighting flickered, and Dorothy instinctively reached across the table to steady her coffee cup. The gesture reminded me how precarious everything felt right now, how easily the normal rhythms of life could be disrupted. "But you said Mom was being reckless," Jessica said, her voice smaller now. "You said Tommy wasn't safe with her." "I said I was worried about Tommy's safety. That's different." David's sigh was audible even through the phone's speaker. "Your mother just offered to do everything I thought a court would order her to do, and more. She's willing to have supervised visits with you as the supervisor. She's volunteering for safety training. She's putting Tommy's well-being ahead of her own pride." I felt a strange mix of gratitude and apprehension. David's support was unexpected, but I also sensed there was more coming. "The truth is," David continued, "I started having doubts about the custody plan last week when I was filling out the initial paperwork. There was a question about the child's current living situation and happiness level. I sat there trying to figure out how to explain that Tommy is actually doing great with you, Jessica. He's thriving. His routine is stable. He's bonded with you. He talks about both his grandparents with love." Jessica's eyes were wide in the strange lighting. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe our real problem isn't that your mom needs less time with Tommy. Maybe it's that she needs better preparation for that time, and we need better communication between all of us." Dorothy leaned forward, her professional instincts clearly engaged despite the surreal setting. "David, are you withdrawing from the custody modification?" "I'm saying I want to hear how tonight's conversation plays out before I file anything with the court. If Margaret follows through on what she's proposing, if Jessica feels comfortable with the supervised visit arrangement, then maybe we can solve this as a family instead of letting lawyers and judges decide what's best for Tommy." The weight of his words settled over our little circle of light. Outside, I could hear the rumble of a generator starting up somewhere, and the normal sounds of evening traffic continued, as if the world beyond our darkened coffee shop was unchanged. Jessica was quiet for so long that David finally asked, "Jess, are you still there?" "I'm here," she said softly. "I'm just thinking about what Mom said earlier, about trust being rebuilt through actions over time." "What specifically are you thinking?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, despite the hope building in my chest. Jessica looked directly at me in the dim light. "I'm thinking that if you're really willing to do supervised visits, and if you really complete some kind of child-proofing and safety course, then maybe we could try it. But I need to know this isn't just something you're saying tonight because you're scared about the custody thing." "It's not," I said firmly. "Jessica, even if your father had never mentioned custody modification, I'd still want to do whatever it takes to rebuild your confidence in me. Losing your trust has been harder than losing the unsupervised visits. Dorothy's phone buzzed with a text, and she glanced at it quickly. The power company says it should be back on within the hour. But this actually feels like the right setting for this conversation, doesn't it? Everything's stripped down to basics. She was right. Something about sitting in this circle of artificial light, with the familiar sounds of the coffee shop silenced, made everything feel more honest and immediate. There's something else I need to say, Jessica said, her voice gaining strength. Mom, when I found out you and Dad had been talking without including me, I felt like you were both treating me like a child instead of Tommy's primary caregiver. Like my opinion about his safety didn't matter. That's completely fair. David's voice came through the phone. We should have included you from the beginning. And I should have come to you first when I realized I needed help with childproofing and safety awareness, I added. You're the one who knows Tommy's current routines and needs best. Jessica nodded slowly. If we're going to try this supervised visit thing, I need us to agree that all communication about Tommy goes through me, or at least includes me. No more side conversations between you two about what's best for him. Agreed, David and I said almost simultaneously, which made Jessica smile for the first time since the lights had gone out. Dorothy was taking notes on her phone, the screen's glow adding to our small pool of light. So, we're talking about a trial period of supervised visits, with Jessica as supervisor, while Margaret completes safety training. All communication about Tommy includes Jessica. What about the timeline? I'd like to start the safety course as soon as possible, I said. Maybe we could do a first supervised visit this weekend if Jessica is comfortable with that. Jessica bit her lip, considering. What would the visit look like? Same activities as before, just with me watching? Whatever makes you feel most comfortable. If you want to start with something low-key like reading books at your apartment, that's fine with me. If you want to try the park again, but with both of us actively supervising, that's fine too. I think I'd like to start with something at home, Jessica said slowly. Maybe you could come over Saturday afternoon, and we could bake cookies with Tommy? That way I can see how you handle things like kitchen safety and keeping track of him while we're focused on an activity. The simplicity of it made my throat tight with emotion. Baking cookies with my grandson while my daughter watched, proving that I could keep him safe while measuring flour and watching oven timers. It should have felt demeaning, but instead, it felt like hope. That sounds perfect, I managed to say. David's voice came through the phone again. If this trial period works out, what does the long-term plan look like? Dorothy looked up from her note-taking. That's something we'd evaluate as we go. The goal would be gradually returning to independent visits as trust rebuilds, but with better safety protocols and communication in place. There's one more thing, Jessica said suddenly. Mom, I need you to promise me that if I point out a safety concern during these supervised visits, you won't get defensive or argue with me in front of Tommy. The question hung in the air between us. This was the real test of whether I'd truly heard what Jessica had been trying to tell me. Could I accept correction from my own daughter without letting my pride get in the way? I promise, I said. If you see something I'm missing or doing wrong, I want you to tell me, even if it feels embarrassing in the moment. Jessica's shoulders relaxed visibly. Okay, then I think we should try this. Just then, the lights flickered back on, flooding the coffee shop with sudden brightness. We all blinked in the harsh fluorescent glare, the normal sounds of the espresso machine and overhead music returning like a rush of ordinary life. But as my eyes adjusted, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Through the now illuminated front window, I could see a familiar car pulling into the parking lot. It was Michael's car, But he was supposed to be at his book club tonight. And he wasn't alone. My breath caught in my throat as I watched Michael get out of his car. The woman with him was tall, professionally dressed, carrying what looked like a briefcase. They were walking purposefully toward the coffee shop entrance. "Mom, what's wrong?" Jessica asked, following my gaze. Her face immediately tensed when she spotted her father. "What is Dad doing here? He said he had book club tonight." Dorothy turned in her chair to look out the window. "That's Michael, I assume? Who's the woman with him?" "I have no idea," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. All the progress we'd just made, all the careful rebuilding of trust, suddenly felt fragile and threatened. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed as Michael entered, followed by the woman. His eyes scanned the room until they found our table. The expression on his face was unreadable, but there was something determined about the way he approached us. "Jessica," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Margaret, I wasn't expecting to find you here." "Dad, what are you doing here?" Jessica stood up, her posture defensive. "You said you were going to book club, and why aren't you answering your phone? I tried calling you earlier." Michael's jaw tightened. "I turned my phone off because I was in a meeting. Jessica, this is Linda Hartwell. She's an attorney who specializes in family law and grandparents' rights." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt Dorothy's hand move protectively toward her notepad, and I saw Jessica's face go white. "Grandparents' rights?" Jessica's voice was sharp. "Dad, what did you do?" Linda Hartwell stepped forward slightly. She was younger than I'd expected, with kind eyes that didn't match the gravity of the situation. "Ms. Chen, I presume? Your father contacted me about exploring legal options for maintaining a relationship with your son. Are you serious right now?" Jessica whirled to face Michael. "We just spent the last 2 hours working things out. Mom and I have a plan. We're going to try supervised visits starting this weekend. And you're here with a lawyer?" Michael's face flushed. "I didn't know you were meeting tonight. You didn't tell me anything about this, Jessica. The last I heard, you were considering cutting off all contact between Tommy and your mother. So your solution was to threaten legal action?" Jessica's voice was rising, and other patrons in the coffee shop were starting to stare. "Dad, how could you think this was a good idea?" Dorothy cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Chen, perhaps we could all sit down and discuss this calmly. It sounds like there might be some miscommunication here." Linda looked uncomfortable, glancing between Michael and Jessica. "Mr. Chen, you mentioned that mediation had failed and that your ex-wife was being completely denied access to her grandson. This doesn't look like a situation that requires legal intervention." "Because it's not," Jessica said firmly. "Dad, Mom made mistakes. She wasn't being careful enough with Tommy's safety, but we're working it out as a family. We don't need lawyers or courts or any of that." Michael sat down heavily in an empty chair someone had pulled over from a nearby table. "Jessica, I was worried. You called me crying last week, saying you didn't know if you could ever trust your mother alone with Tommy again. I thought I was helping. By going behind my back? By hiring an attorney without even talking to me first?" Jessica's hands were shaking slightly. "Dad, this isn't your decision to make. Tommy is my son." I found my voice finally, though it came out rougher than I intended. "Michael, what exactly were you planning to do? Sue our daughter for visitation rights to our grandson?" "I was exploring options," Michael said defensively. "Linda was explaining that sometimes grandparents can petition the court for reasonable visitation when they're being unreasonably denied access to their grandchildren." Linda Hartwell held up a hand. "Mr. Chen, Based on what I'm seeing here tonight, this really isn't a situation that warrants legal action. These kinds of cases are typically for situations where there's been a complete breakdown in family communication or where a parent is using the child as a weapon. That's clearly not what's happening here. It felt like it was happening, Michael said quietly. Margaret, you have to understand. When Jessica told me she was considering cutting off your visits entirely, I panicked. I thought about how devastated you'd be, and I thought about Tommy losing his grandmother, and I just wanted to fix it. Dorothy leaned forward slightly. Mr. Chen, I'm Dorothy, a family counselor. I've been helping Margaret and Jessica work through this situation. What you're describing sounds like a parent's natural instinct to protect everyone they love, but legal action really would have made things worse. I can see that now, Michael admitted, looking at Jessica's still angry face. Jess, I'm sorry. I should have talked to you first. Jessica sat back down, but her posture remained tense. Dad, do you have any idea how this looks to me? It looks like you and Mom were coordinating behind my back. First I find out she's been talking to you about my parenting decisions, and now you're hiring lawyers without telling me. We weren't coordinating anything, I said quickly. Jessica, I had no idea Michael was talking to an attorney. None at all. Is that true, Dad? Jessica asked. Michael nodded. Your mother didn't know. I made this decision on my own after our phone conversation last week. Linda, I think I owe you an apology too. I may have misrepresented the situation when I called. Linda gathered her briefcase. These things happen more than you'd think, Mr. Chen. Family situations can feel more dire than they actually are when emotions are running high. It sounds like you all have things well in hand. She nodded politely to the rest of us. I'll send you a bill for the consultation, but there won't be any further charges since we're not proceeding. After Linda left, the three of us sat in awkward silence. Dorothy was taking notes again, and I could see her formulating something in her mind. Finally, Jessica spoke. Dad, I need you to promise me something. I need you to promise that you will never, ever take legal action involving my son without talking to me first. And I need you to stop having conversations with Mom about my parenting without including me. Michael ran his hands through his hair. I promise, Jess. Both things. I was just worried about everyone, and I handled it completely wrong. You did handle it wrong, Jessica agreed. But I also realize I haven't been communicating clearly with either of you about what I was actually thinking and planning. Dorothy looked up from her notepad. This is actually a good example of how family systems can get complicated when people start working around each other instead of with each other. Michael, your instinct to protect both Margaret and Jessica was admirable, but the execution created exactly the kind of secrecy and mistrust that Jessica was already concerned about. I can see that now, Michael said. Margaret, are you okay? You've been really quiet. I took a shaky breath. Honestly, Michael, when I saw you walk in here with an attorney, I thought my world was about to collapse again. We had just made real progress, Jessica and I. We have a plan to rebuild trust, and suddenly, I thought you were going to turn this into some kind of legal battle that would destroy any chance of fixing things with our daughter. I would never want to hurt your relationship with Jessica, Michael said earnestly. That was the opposite of what I was trying to do. Jessica looked between us. This is exactly what I'm talking about, though. Both of you making decisions about what you think is best for me or for Tommy without actually including me in the conversation. I'm not a child. I'm Tommy's mother, and I need both of you to respect that I can handle difficult situations. Dorothy nodded approvingly. Jessica, that's a really important boundary to establish. And Michael, Margaret, Do you both understand what Jessica is asking for? Yes, I said immediately. Jessica, no more conversations about you or Tommy without including you. I understand. Same here, Michael agreed. But Jess, I hope you also understand that we were both acting out of love, even if we did it wrong. I know that, Dad. But love without respect isn't really love, is it? The profound truth of Jessica's statement settled over all of us. I thought about all the times I'd made decisions about Tommy's care without really listening to Jessica's concerns, convinced that my experience and love were enough justification. Dorothy closed her notepad. I think this has actually been a really productive evening, despite the unexpected turn. Jessica, you've gotten commitments from both your parents about including you in decisions that affect your family. Michael, you've learned about the importance of working within the family system rather than around it. And Margaret, you've seen how your daughter can handle conflict and make mature decisions about what's best for everyone involved. So, where does this leave us? Michael asked. Are we still moving forward with the supervised visits? Jessica looked at me. Mom, how do you feel about moving forward after all this? I considered the question carefully. The evening had been emotional and complicated, but ultimately it had shown me something important about my daughter's strength and wisdom. I feel more confident about moving forward, actually, I said. Jessica, watching you handle this situation tonight, seeing you stand up for yourself and for Tommy while still being fair to both your father and me, it makes me trust your judgment even more. If you think supervised visits are the right way to start rebuilding, then I'm completely committed to that plan. Jessica smiled for the first time since Michael had walked in. Okay then. Saturday afternoon, my apartment, we're making cookies with Tommy. And Dad, you're uninvited to that particular activity. Michael laughed, the tension finally breaking. Understood. I'll find something else to do with my Saturday. Dorothy stood up to leave. I think you all have a good foundation to work with. Margaret, Jessica, keep communication open during these supervised visits. And Michael, thank you for demonstrating tonight that people can admit mistakes and change course when they need to. As we gathered our things to leave, I felt cautiously optimistic. The evening had been full of surprises and difficult moments, but we'd navigated them as a family. We'd been honest with each other, we'd set clear boundaries, and we'd made commitments to do better. But as we walked toward the parking lot, I noticed Michael checking his phone with a frown. What's wrong, Dad? Jessica asked. Michael's face went pale as he read the message on his screen. There's been an emergency. Someone broke into Margaret's house tonight. My heart stopped. What do you mean, someone broke into my house? Who told you that? Michael held up his phone. I have a security alert app connected to your system, remember? From when we were married. I never disconnected it after the divorce. You've been monitoring my house this whole time? The violation felt immediate and sharp. Not monitoring, Michael said quickly. I just never removed the app. The alerts only go off for emergencies like break-ins or fire alarms. I wasn't checking up on your daily routine, I swear. Jessica stepped between us. We can deal with the privacy issues later. Right now, we need to figure out what happened to Mom's house. I need to get home, I said, panic rising in my chest. All of Tommy's things are there, his room, his toys, everything. We're coming with you, Jessica said firmly. Jessica, no. If someone is still there, if it's dangerous... Mom, you're not handling this alone. That's exactly the kind of thing we just talked about in therapy. Michael was already walking toward his car. I'll follow you there, Margaret. Jessica's right. You shouldn't go alone. During the 20-minute drive home, my mind raced through all the possibilities. Was it a random break-in? Had someone been watching the house, waiting for me to leave? Were Tommy's things safe? When we pulled into my driveway, the first thing I noticed was the front door standing partially open. My living room lamp was on, casting light across the porch, but I couldn't remember if I'd left it on when Dorothy picked me up for the mediation. "Stay in the car for a minute," Michael said, getting out of his vehicle. "Let me check if anyone's still inside." "Michael, no, we should call the police first." "I'm just going to look through the windows," he said. "I'm not going inside." Jessica grabbed my arm as I started to follow him. "Mom, let Dad check." "You're shaking." She was right. My hands were trembling as I watched Michael walk carefully around the perimeter of the house, peering through windows. After what felt like forever, he came back to the car. "It looks clear," he said. "I can see into most of the downstairs rooms, and nothing looks disturbed from what I can tell. But the front door is definitely open." We approached the house together, Jessica holding my arm for support. When we stepped through the front door, I immediately felt something was different, but I couldn't pinpoint what. "The living room looks normal," Jessica said, scanning the space. Michael checked the kitchen while I went to the back of the house to look at Tommy's room. My breath caught when I saw his bedroom door was closed. I always left it open. "Jessica," I called, "come here." She appeared beside me as I slowly turned the doorknob. Tommy's room looked exactly as I'd left it, but there was an envelope on his small desk that hadn't been there before. "There's something here," I said, pointing to the envelope. Michael joined us as I picked it up with shaking hands. My name was written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. "What does it say?" Jessica asked. I opened the envelope and read the single sheet of paper inside. My legs nearly gave out. "Mom, what is it?" I handed her the letter, unable to speak. Jessica read aloud. "Margaret, I know about the supervised visits starting this weekend. I know about the mediation tonight. I know where Tommy goes to school and what time he gets picked up. You think you're protecting him, but you don't understand what you're really dealing with. Some secrets are more dangerous than you realize. Stop digging into the past, or you'll put Tommy in real danger." "Who would write something like this?" Michael asked, his face pale. "Margaret, what secrets are they talking about? What past?" I sank onto Tommy's small bed, the weight of everything crashing down on me. "I don't know. I haven't been digging into anything. All I've been focused on is getting my son back." Jessica sat beside me, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Mom, think carefully. Has anything unusual happened lately? Anyone asking questions about Tommy or about Dad or about your marriage?" "No, nothing like that. The only people I've been dealing with are the social workers, Dorothy, you two, and Tommy's foster parents." Michael paced the small room. "This person knows about tonight's mediation and about the supervised visits. That's information only a few people would have." "Are you suggesting one of us wrote this?" Jessica's voice had an edge. "No, I'm saying someone has access to information about our family situation that they shouldn't have." I looked around Tommy's room, trying to make sense of what was happening. Everything had felt like it was finally moving in the right direction. The mediation had been difficult but productive. Jessica and I were rebuilding our relationship. Michael and I had found a way to work together for Tommy's sake. Now someone was threatening my child, and I had no idea why. "We need to call the police," I said finally. "And tell them what?" Michael asked. "That someone broke in but didn't steal anything, just left a cryptic note?" "That someone is threatening Tommy," Jessica said firmly. "That's what we tell them." As I reached for my phone, I noticed something else that made my blood run cold. Tommy's favorite stuffed elephant, which always sat on his pillow, was now on the nightstand. Someone had moved it. Someone had been in my son's room, touching his things, and I had no idea who or why. The three of us sat in stunned silence for several minutes, the threatening letter lying on Tommy's bed between us like a poisonous snake. I kept staring at the stuffed elephant on the nightstand, trying to convince myself I might have moved it myself and forgotten. "Mom," Jessica said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Michael and I both looked at her. There was something in her tone that made my stomach clench. "What is it, honey?" Jessica took a shaky breath. "When I was working with Dad on the custody papers, he mentioned something strange. He said Tommy had asked him about a man who had been watching him at school." "What?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "When? Why didn't anyone tell me?" It was right before the supervised visit started. Dad said Tommy mentioned it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. Just that there was a man in a car who seemed to be there when school got out several days in a row. Michael ran his hands through his hair. "Margaret, this changes everything. Someone has been watching Tommy, and now they're threatening you." "But why?" I stood up, pacing the small room. "What secrets could I possibly have? What past are they talking about? My life is an open book. I work, I take care of my kids, I pay my bills." Jessica picked up the letter again, reading it more carefully. "Mom, think about Dad's life, not yours. You were married to him for 15 years. Maybe this has nothing to do with you directly." "Your father was an accountant?" I said. "What kind of dangerous secrets could an accountant have?" "The kind that involve other people's money," Michael said grimly. "Margaret, did your ex-husband ever mention any problems at work? Any difficult clients?" I tried to think back to our marriage, to conversations that had seemed meaningless at the time. He used to complain about one client who was always demanding special arrangements for their books. Someone who paid in cash and wanted everything kept off certain records. But I thought it was just typical small business stuff. "What was the client's name?" Jessica asked. "I don't remember. This was years ago, and honestly, I tried not to pay attention when he talked about work. It was boring." I sat back down, feeling overwhelmed. But even if there was something questionable about his business, why would someone threaten Tommy now? "We've been divorced for 2 years. Michael moved to the window and carefully looked out through the curtains. Maybe because Tommy has been asking questions. Kids notice things adults think they don't. "What kind of questions?" "Think about it," Jessica said. "You two are in this custody battle. Tommy's probably confused and maybe scared. He might have said something to the wrong person about where his dad works, or about papers he's seen, or conversations he's overheard." I felt sick. So this is my fault. If I hadn't pushed for the custody change, if I had just left things alone? "No," Michael said firmly, turning from the window. "Don't you dare blame yourself. You're fighting for your son because you love him. That's what good mothers do." Jessica reached over and took my hand. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened between us, about the custody stuff and how I reacted. I was angry because I felt like our family was falling apart again, and I wanted someone to blame." "Jess, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. When Dad first called me about helping with the custody papers, part of me was glad. I thought maybe if you lost some time with Tommy, you'd realize what you had done to our family when you divorced Dad." Michael looked uncomfortable, but he didn't interrupt. "But watching you these past few weeks," Jessica continued, "seeing how hard you're fighting for Tommy, how much you've grown since the divorce, I realized I was wrong. You didn't break up our family, Mom. You saved yourself, And probably save Tommy, too. I squeezed her hand, tears threatening to spill over. Thank you for saying that. It means everything to me. The point is, Jessica said, I know Dad better than I wanted to admit. And I know he's not as innocent as he pretends to be. There were things about his business that never made sense, even when I was in high school. Like what? Like why he always insisted on doing taxes for certain people at the house instead of at his office. Why some clients paid him in cash. Why he had a separate phone that he only answered in his study with the door closed. I stared at my daughter. You never mentioned any of this before. Because I didn't want to believe it, and because after the divorce, I was so angry at you that I convinced myself Dad was the victim in everything. Michael sat down on the other side of me. So, what do we do now? We can't ignore a threat against Tommy, but we also can't go to the police without more information. We call Tommy's father, I said. Right now. We tell him about this letter, and we demand answers. Jessica nodded. And if he won't give them to us? I looked at both of them. These two people who had become my support system in ways I never expected. My daughter, who had finally found her way back to me, and Michael, who had shown me what real partnership looked like. Then we figure it out ourselves, I said. The three of us, because I'll be damned if I'm going to let anyone use my son as leverage for something his father did. I picked up my phone, knowing that the conversation I was about to have would change everything. But for the first time in months, I wasn't facing it alone.